Here's something most people don't realize. The first signs of clogged arteries don't usually show up in your heart. They show up in your brain. Before chest pain, there's brain fog. Before a heart attack, there's fatigue, irritability, or sudden memory lapses. That's because poor blood flow doesn't just affect your cardiovascular system, it affects how well your neurons fire, how sharp your thinking feels, even how emotionally stable you are day to day. Now, here's the good news. The same science that helps us understand plaque buildup in arteries is also showing us how to reverse it. Not with extreme diets, not with medications alone, but with specific evidence-backed meals that literally help your arteries repair themselves meal by meal, fork by fork. We're talking about real measurable changes in blood vessel flexibility, inflammation markers dropping, endothelial function, which controls how wide or narrow your blood vessels can expand, improving in a matter of days. The research is clear. Certain nutrients and meal patterns don't just protect your arteries, they actively help clean them out. And the effects aren't subtle. In studies from places like Harvard, UCLA, and the Cleveland Clinic, participants saw drastic improvements in vascular health just by changing what they ate for lunch and dinner. Here's why this matters. Healthy arteries aren't just about preventing disease later, they're about having more energy now, more mental clarity, better mood, stronger focus, a better workout, even better sleep. In this episode, we're going to break down the science of artery-clearing meals and, more importantly, how to build one. Which will cover 6 key ideas. The one food group that acts like a pressure washer for your arteries. How timing your meals affects blood flow and inflammation. What saturated fat really does to your vessels, and how to neutralize the damage. The overlooked spice that acts like statins in the body. How meal frequency can either help or hurt your vascular system. And the exact components of a cleansing plate based on peer-reviewed clinical research. Let's get into the first one. Let's start with fiber, but not the kind you sprinkle into smoothies or take in capsules. I'm talking about real plant-based fiber that comes from whole foods like beans, berries, greens, lentils, and oats. This is the food group that functions like a biological pressure washer inside your vascular system. Here's what the research shows. People who eat a high-fiber diet, particularly soluble fiber, consistently have lower levels of LDL cholesterol. That's the bad cholesterol that contributes to plaque formation in your arteries. Soluble fiber binds to cholesterol in the gut and helps shuttle it out of the body before it ever gets into your bloodstream. It's not just slowing the buildup, it's helping clear it out. One landmark study published in The Lancet looked at data from over 135 million person-years across multiple countries. They found that people who consumed at least 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day had significantly lower rates of heart disease and stroke. Not marginally lower, significantly. And what's more, they lived longer. Now let's ground this in something practical. If you've ever cleaned a greasy pan with a dry paper towel, you know it just smears the mess around. But if you add water and scrub with a sponge, the grease lifts away. Fiber works the same way. It scrubs out what your body doesn't need. Extra fats, metabolic waste, inflammatory byproducts, and carries them out before they become a problem. But here's where it gets interesting from a neuroscience standpoint. A fiber-rich meal doesn't just help your heart, it also changes your brain chemistry. When you eat soluble fiber, your gut bacteria ferment it and produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs. These SCFAs do a few important things. They lower inflammation, strengthen the gut lining, and send signals to the brain through the vagus nerve. One of those signals? Increased production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, a molecule that supports cognitive function, emotional regulation, and neuroplasticity. So when people say you are what you eat, there's real science behind that. A high-fiber meal improves how your heart pumps and how your brain works, all within the same day. Now let's make this actionable. A simple tool to apply is what I call the 2 cups and a scoop method. At lunch or dinner, aim for 2 cups of colorful vegetables, leafy greens, bell peppers, broccoli, cabbage, and 1 scoop of either lentils, beans, or whole grains like quinoa or oats. This alone can get you close to 20 grams of fiber in a single meal. Add a handful of berries or an apple for dessert, and you've just done something powerful for your arteries and your brain. Here's a quick check-in question. When was the last time your lunch actually included that level of fiber? Most people fall far short. The average intake in the US is around 15 grams per day, total. That's barely half the minimum recommended amount. And if you're thinking, well, won't that make me feel bloated or gassy? Only at first. As your gut bacteria adapt, that discomfort fades. Think of it like training a muscle. The more consistently you feed your microbiome this way, the more efficient it becomes. Within 2 to 3 weeks, most people notice improved digestion, more regular energy levels, and better sleep quality. So the bottom line here is this: a fiber-rich meal isn't a side note, it's a central tool. It's the simplest, most direct way to reduce plaque, lower cholesterol, and enhance both cardiovascular and cognitive function. And here's where we go next. If you've got the right foods on your plate, the next lever to pull is when you eat them. Because timing, surprisingly, can change how your blood vessels behave. That's coming up in part 2. If you've dialed in what's on your plate, the next variable to master is when you eat it. And this one's overlooked far too often. Here's the thing. Your vascular system follows a circadian rhythm. Just like your brain does, blood vessel flexibility, insulin sensitivity, inflammation levels, all of these fluctuate across the day based on your internal clock. And when you eat out of sync with that rhythm, it can trigger spikes in blood sugar, inflammatory responses, and even impair the endothelial cells that line your arteries. Let me explain with a study. Researchers at the National Institutes of Health tracked participants eating identical meals at different times of day. The group that ate earlier, front-loading calories toward breakfast and lunch, had lower insulin levels, reduced markers of inflammation like CRP, C-reactive protein, and better arterial elasticity compared to those who consumed most of their calories late at night. Same food, different timing, very different vascular outcomes. Why? Because your body's natural clock primes your metabolism to handle nutrients better earlier in the day. Think of it like trying to drive through a city. In the morning, the roads are clear, everything's running efficiently. But by late evening, traffic builds up. If you try to shove a heavy meal into the system, then it leads to congestion in your bloodstream, in your metabolic pathways, in your arteries. Here's what's happening in your brain when this occurs. Eating late disrupts the expression of clock genes in the hypothalamus, the part of your brain that regulates sleep, metabolism, and hormonal signaling. That disruption cascades. Melatonin release is delayed, growth hormone secretion is blunted. Cortisol stays elevated longer than it should. And the result? Inflammation sticks around instead of being cleared overnight like it's supposed to. So here's a practical tool. Aim to eat your last full meal at least 3 hours before sleep. Give your system time to wind down. You don't need to fast for 16 hours or skip breakfast to get benefits. Just align your biggest meals with daylight and let your metabolism ride the rhythm it was designed for. Now let's address the common pushback. But I'm not hungry in the morning. Totally fair. Appetite timing is highly trainable. Just like jet lag, your body can shift with consistency. Start small, a high-fiber piece of toast, a boiled egg, or even a simple smoothie with oats and berries. Within a week or two, your hunger cues will adjust. And the benefits? Lower triglycerides, reduced post-meal glucose spikes, and better overnight recovery. In fact, one study from Tel Aviv University showed that people who ate their largest meal at breakfast lost more weight and had better artery function than those who ate the same calories at dinner. It's not just about weight, it's about what those calories are doing inside your vessels. If this insight is helping you rethink your routines, consider subscribing. Every episode on this channel brings you science-backed tools to improve the way your brain and body work, and there's a lot more where this came from. So now you've got 2 powerful levers: what you eat and when you eat it. But the third piece is about what happens after the food is in your system. And that brings us to the next topic: what saturated fats really do to your arteries and how to buffer their impact. Let's talk about saturated fat, not from a place of fear or oversimplification, but from what the science actually shows happening inside your arteries when you eat it, and how to work with that knowledge, not against it. Here's what's clear from decades of vascular research: when saturated fat enters the bloodstream, especially from animal-based sources like fatty cuts of red meat, butter, or full-fat dairy, It can increase levels of LDL cholesterol, particularly small, dense LDL particles. These are the ones more likely to penetrate the arterial wall and trigger inflammation. But the damage isn't caused by cholesterol alone. The problem is what happens next. Oxidation. Think of your blood vessels like a highway. LDL particles floating through the blood are like delivery trucks. On their own, they're not dangerous. But when those trucks get damaged through oxidation caused by inflammation, high blood sugar, or toxic byproducts, they crash into the arterial wall. That crash leads to immune cells rushing in, creating a plaque site and beginning the atherosclerosis process. Now here's where it gets practical. It's not about cutting saturated fat to zero. It's about buffering the effects with foods and nutrients that prevent that oxidation from happening in the first place. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that when participants ate saturated fat alongside polyphenol-rich foods like berries, dark leafy greens, or green tea, markers of oxidative stress were significantly lower compared to when the same fat was eaten alone. The antioxidants in these foods effectively protect the LDL particles from being damaged. So what's the tool? Pair your saturated fat sources with antioxidant-rich sides. If you're going to eat a steak, have it with steamed broccoli, a side of kale, or a small bowl of blueberries for dessert. It's not about restriction, it's about balance and buffering. Here's another option. Swap part of the saturated fat with monounsaturated fat. Think olive oil, avocado, or nuts. One meta-analysis in Circulation found that replacing just 5% of calories from saturated fat with monounsaturated fat reduced coronary events by over 20%. And from a neuroscience perspective, there's something else at play here. High saturated fat meals can impair the function of the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning, especially when consumed repeatedly without antioxidants or fiber to balance it. So this isn't just about long-term artery health. It's also about daily cognition and mental performance. Ask yourself this: how often are your meals built to counterbalance the effects of what's on your plate? For most people, the answer is rarely, but the shift is simple. Here sips a framework to use. If you're eating animal protein with visible fat, add a bitter green like arugula, spinach, or mustard greens. Include a fermented food like kimchi or sauerkraut, which helps reduce inflammation through the gut-brain axis. And finish the meal with something rich in polyphenols. A few chunks of dark chocolate, some berries, or even a glass of unsweetened pomegranate juice. This isn't about guilt or fear. It's about precision, about knowing what your biology needs to stay flexible, resilient, and clean on the inside. So far, we've looked at what scrubs the arteries clean, when to eat for optimal flow, and how to diffuse the inflammatory effects of saturated fat. But now let's flip the script. Because there's one common kitchen ingredient that mimics the effects of prescription statins, but without the side effects. And you probably already have it in your spice rack. We still get into that next. Let's talk about an ingredient that most people walk past in the grocery store without giving it a second thought, but inside the body, it behaves remarkably like a pharmaceutical drug, specifically a statin. It's garlic. And the research on it isn't fringe or speculative. It's been studied for decades in some of the most respected journals in cardiovascular science. In a meta-analysis published in the Journal of Nutrition, researchers looked at 26 randomized controlled trials involving over 1,400 participants. They found that aged garlic extract significantly reduced both total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol levels, while also improving blood pressure in people with hypertension. And perhaps most impressively, garlic helps slow the progression of coronary artery calcification, which is the hardening and narrowing of arteries from long-term plaque buildup. But how does it actually work? Here's what's happening at the cellular level. Garlic contains a compound called allicin, which forms when the cloves are crushed or chopped. Allicin supports nitric oxide production, a molecule that relaxes blood vessels, reduces stiffness, and improves flow. It also has potent antioxidant effects, helping prevent the oxidative damage that turns regular cholesterol into arterial plaque. In that way, it behaves a lot like a statin, lowering harmful lipids, improving vessel elasticity, and reducing inflammation. But unlike statins, garlic also boosts immune function, supports gut microbiota, and doesn't carry the same risk of muscle breakdown or fatigue. Now, to be clear, we're not talking about garlic supplements here. Most capsules contain too little allicin to make a difference, and some contain none at all. What works is real, raw garlic, crushed and allowed to sit for about 10 minutes before eating. That rest period allows the enzymatic conversion to allicin to take place. Cook it too soon and the benefit is gone. So what sips the protocol? A simple tool is to crush 1 clove of garlic, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then mix it into olive oil, hummus, or spread it on whole grain toast. Do this a few times a week. Your arteries will thank you. If raw garlic's too intense, try roasting it whole. It's gentler. And while the allicin content drops, you still get vascular benefits from other sulfur-based compounds like S-L-cysteine. And here's something else worth noting. Garlic doesn't work alone. When combined with other polyphenol-rich foods like turmeric, green tea, or dark berries, the effects are additive. One study from the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that combining garlic with other anti-inflammatory spices lowered arterial stiffness more than either one alone. Now think about this. How often is your spice rack treated as part of your health protocol? Probably never. But what you keep in those jars, cumin, cinnamon, ginger, turmeric, oregano, all of them contain bioactive compounds that directly impact inflammation and blood vessel function. So don't just eat for calories, eat for chemistry. And if this has sparked a shift in how you think about your meals, consider subscribing. Every week, we dive into practical, science-backed strategies to optimize your mental and physical health. If you're learning something useful here, there's a lot more coming. Coming up next, we've talked about what to eat and how to enhance it, but what about how often? Because the number of meals you eat per day and the gaps between them can either promote arterial repair or constant low-grade damage. That seps what we per digging into next. We've talked about what's on the plate. Now let's zoom out and look at how often the plate shows up. Because here's the truth. Your arteries don't just respond to what you eat. They respond to how often you ask your body to process food. And it turns out that constant grazing, even on healthy meals, may keep the vascular system in a state of low-grade stress. Here sits why. Every time you eat, your body enters what's called the postprandial state. The few hours after a meal where blood sugar rises, insulin is released, and inflammatory molecules like IL-6 and TNF-alpha temporarily increase. This is normal. The body's handling nutrients, packaging them, clearing them. But if you're eating 5, 6, or 7 times a day, that post-meal stress response never fully subsides. The system stays busy. It doesn't get time to clean up. Now compare that to someone who eats just 2 or 3 substantial meals per day, with real space in between. That pause gives your vascular system a chance to recover. In fact, during these fasting windows, a process called autophagy is upregulated, which literally means self-cleaning. Cells start clearing out damaged proteins, inflammation drops, and the endothelial lining of your arteries gets a chance to restore itself. In one study published in Cell Metabolism, researchers showed that intermittent fasting led to increased expression of vascular protective genes and improved endothelial function, even without weight loss. This wasn't about calories, it was about timing and recovery. So what's the takeaway? The number of meals matters, not just for metabolism, but for artery health. A simple protocol to try is the 12/3 method. Eat all meals within a 12-hour window during the day. Stop eating at least 3 hours before bedtime. Let's say your first meal is at 8 a.m. That means your last bite should be around 8 p.m., ideally earlier. And if you can move toward a 10-hour eating window like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., even better. Now, this doesn't mean skipping meals. It means consolidating them, so your body gets longer periods of metabolic rest. If you're eating breakfast at 8, lunch at 1, and dinner at 6, that's 3 well-spaced meals that give your vascular system time to reset in between. Let steps make this real. Ask yourself, how many times a day do you eat something, even a snack, coffee with cream, or a handful of nuts, that technically breaks the fasted state? For most people, it's 8 to 10 small eating events a day. And while that might seem harmless, it keeps insulin elevated, digestion constantly activated, and arterial inflammation slightly elevated all day long. Giving your body room to pause, digest, and clean up is critical. It's like running a dishwasher. You can't load it every 10 minutes and expect clean results. You need cycles, breaks, space between inputs. From a brain standpoint, spacing meals also enhances clarity. That's because during fasting periods, the body produces ketones, which serve as a clean-burning fuel source for the brain. That's why many people notice sharper focus and calmer energy when they go 4 or 5 hours between meals. So meal frequency isn't just about metabolism. It's about neurovascular recovery. It's about letting your arteries and brain operate with less background noise, less inflammatory clutter. And when you combine all these tools, the right foods, the right timing, and the right spacing, you're not just eating, you're actively remodeling your vascular system for the better. Coming up next, we'll pull it all together into one powerful visual: what a real artery cleansing plate actually looks like. The proportions, the textures, the timing. So you can build this into your next meal without overthinking it. That sips next. Let's take everything we've explored so far: the fiber, the fats, the antioxidants, the timing, the spacing, and build an actual plate. Because when people hear "eat for your arteries," they often picture bland salads or extreme diets. But that's not what the science supports. What we're really aiming for is vascular nourishment, giving your blood vessels what they need to stay elastic, clean, and adaptive. And that doesn't require cutting out whole food groups. It requires intentional combinations. So here's the framework I call the cleansing plate, built around what the best research in cardiovascular nutrition has shown. First, start with fiber. Fill half your plate with colorful, high-fiber plants. Think leafy greens like arugula, kale, or spinach. Add something vibrant: red cabbage, carrots, bell peppers. This fiber doesn't just scrub your arteries, it also feeds the good bacteria in your gut, which lowers systemic inflammation. Next, include a clean protein: wild-caught salmon, grilled tempeh, lentils, or pasture-raised chicken, ideally in portions that match the size of your palm. Protein supports endothelial repair and gives structure to your meal, but it also matters how it's cooked. Grilled or baked is better than deep-fried. Cooking at lower temperatures avoids the formation of advanced glycation end products, AGs, which are inflammatory compounds that damage arterial walls. Then, add healthy fats. A drizzle of extra virgin olive oil, a quarter of an avocado, or a handful of walnuts. These bring in monounsaturated fats, which lower LDL and raise HDL, your protective cholesterol. Olive oil in particular is packed with polyphenols that act like molecular fire extinguishers, reducing oxidative stress in the vascular lining. Sprinkle in something anti-inflammatory: a dash of turmeric, some fresh garlic, a pinch of rosemary, or even cinnamon on the side. These spices have been shown to reduce CRP levels, improve arterial flexibility, and increase nitric oxide production, which keeps vessels open and flowing freely. Finally, time it right. Eat this meal during the daylight hours, ideally when your insulin sensitivity is highest, somewhere between mid-morning and late afternoon. And give your body space afterward. No snacking right away, no sugary drinks that keep the inflammation going. Here is an example of how this looks on a real plate. A warm lentil salad with roasted carrots, garlic, and kale drizzled with tahini and lemon. A side of wild blueberries or pomegranate seeds. A small piece of sourdough toast brushed with olive oil and crushed roasted garlic. And a mug of green tea or hibiscus tea on the side. No calorie counting, no math, just structure built from physiology. And the result? A meal that doesn't just fill you up, but actively cleans your arteries. A meal that reduces LDL, boosts nitric oxide, stabilizes glucose, and lowers your inflammation baseline for the next several hours. A meal that helps your brain stay sharper, your mood more balanced, and your energy more stable. It's food as chemistry, food as therapy, food as a daily cardiovascular intervention. So here's your challenge. Build just one of these plates this week. Not perfect, not strict, just intentional. Pick your fiber base, your clean protein, your good fat, your anti-inflammatory spice. Time it earlier in the day. Space out your next meal. And feel what changes in your clarity, your calm, your focus. In the final section, we'll recap what we've learned, reinforce the stakes, and give you one small next step to act on today. So let's step back for a moment and ask, what does it really mean to clear your arteries? It's not about going on a cleanse. It's not about taking a pill. It's not even about following a perfect diet. It's about making small daily choices that reduce the burden on your vascular system so that your body has the space, time, and chemistry it needs to repair itself. Let's quickly recap the tools you now have in your hands. First, we talked about fiber-rich whole foods, beans, greens, lentils, berries that act like internal scrubbers, lowering LDL cholesterol and feeding the microbiome that helps regulate inflammation. Then we explored the timing of meals and how aligning your eating window with daylight can lower blood sugar, improve arterial flexibility, and enhance overnight recovery. We looked at saturated fats, not with fear, but with strategy, understanding how pairing them with antioxidants buffers their effects, and how balance is more effective than restriction. We dug into garlic and its statin-like compounds that improve blood flow, lower cholesterol, and reduce arterial stiffness, all from a single clove, prepared the right way. We tackled meal frequency and how spacing your eating windows allows for autophagy, metabolic reset, and deep vascular repair, especially overnight. And finally, we built the actual artery cleansing plate using fiber, clean protein, healthy fats, anti-inflammatory spices, and meal timing to activate repair mechanisms that most people never tap into. Here's what all of this really points to. Your arteries are not passive. They're responsive. They're alive, adaptable, and in many cases capable of healing when given the right signals. The food you eat isn't just fuel, it's data. Every bite sends a signal to your brain, to your blood, to your immune system, and those signals compound over time. They either create a smooth, open vascular highway, or they set the stage for restriction, friction, and inflammation. The good news, you're in the driver's seat. So here is the one challenge I leave you with. Choose one tool from this episode and try it today. That could mean swapping your late-night snack for an earlier dinner, crushing a clove of garlic and adding it to your lunch, building a high-fiber bowl with lentils, greens, and olive oil, or simply skipping that mid-morning snack and giving your arteries a little extra breathing room. Don't try to change everything. Just prove to yourself that change is possible and that it actually feels good when you do it. And if this episode helped you understand your body in a deeper, more actionable way, I invite you to like the video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. This is a space for people who want to think clearly, feel better, and take ownership of their physical and mental health without gimmicks and without noise. The science is real. The tools are here, and your next meal can be part of the solution. All right, so I'll see you in the next episode.